Welcome into the On3 Studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. Today is Sunday, May 12th. You are tuned in to the Inside Scoop. Happy Mother's Day to all who celebrate. I am glad to be back here talking recruiting with you guys. And we got a great show today because there's a lot of developments that are occurring over the weekend. We got a big Cormani McClain update from the transfer portal. He showed up in Gainesville on Friday. Crazy. All right, Ohio State, they had 3 key O-line targets on campus. We'll go to Letterman Row insider Matt Parker and dig on the Ohio State offensive line board. But first, we got On3 Steve Wiltfong on. He's going to talk some Julian Lewis news, David Sanders' surprise official visit, and some more. Let's bring on Steve right now. All right, Steve, so we'll start with the big Julian Lewis news that you broke on Friday, and the news has to do with a new official visit that's set to a team off the radar. Tell us more.
Well, Julian Lewis is going to take his first official visit of the summer to Indiana. It's a place that he got a chance to visit back in the spring. And his longest standing relationship in college football is with Indiana quarterbacks coach Tino Sunseri. Julian Lewis has mapped this situation he's in out since he was a young lad, him and his family. He attended Florida State's camp when he was 8 years old and hit it off with Tino Sunseri, who was working as like an off-field coach for the Seminoles at the time. Now he's the quarterback's coach at Indiana, and he's getting them up to Bloomington twice now, and that relationship is the brunt of it. But they also like what Coach Cignetti, Coach Shanahan, and that staff did at James Madison offensively, and they view Indiana as a program on the rise. There's still several programs involved here. Julian is committed to USC, has been committed to the Trojans since last fall. He's going to get back to USC for his official visit June 7th. Then he has his official visit to Auburn locked in for June 14th. I still view them as the biggest threat to flip Julian Lewis from USC. And I think there is a lot of confidence around the Plains that they can ultimately get Julian Lewis in this class. And then you have Colorado locked in for June 21st. That'll be his 3rd or 4th visit to campus this calendar year. He's really hit it off with Coach Shermer. They like the direction of that offense. And then certainly the microscope of playing for Coach Prime, an opportunity to start day one, has Colorado in the thick of it for Julian Lewis too. Indiana looking to continue to make a move in this process. And again, there's no coach that he's closer to than Tino Sunseri.
Yeah, I was actually at that camp in 2015 when Tino Sunseri was working with Juju Lewis. Of course, Juju Lewis was not on the recruiting radar at that moment, but hey, maybe
he didn't make
Tino
your top
saw
performers
something in
then?
him. All right. A major 2026 domino at the quarterback position is closing in on a decision. 4-star quarterback Diab Bell is considering a commitment in June or July. Now, Diab Bell, he's the number 4 ranked industry quarterback. He's a little bit higher with the On3 rankings. We have a number 2 quarterback in the country. Steve, we know LSU, Miami, Ohio State, Penn State, and Texas are the teams that he says are recruiting him the hardest. But if Bell is about a month or 2 away from a decision, who you like right now?
Yeah, our colleague Chad Simmons obviously reporting that news, talking to Dia recently. Look, the schools that I've identified right away early on in this process when I first started talking with Dia is obvious he was high on Miami. It was obvious he's high on LSU, and he's high on Penn State. With Miami, he talked about his excitement for the Hurricanes starting the day Coach Cristobal got the job. He really likes Coach Dawson's offense. And he has said the most exciting thing about Miami is that they work hard to keep the local talent home. I think he thinks he can be a special player at Miami and help them get that program where they want to go. Penn State, man, they've, with Coach O'Brien and Coach Kotelnicki and then certainly Coach Franklin. He feels very close to several people in that building. He's talked about the incredible fan base, the atmosphere inside Beaver Stadium. I think he considers it the best in college football. And it's an offense where he thinks he can be creative and be dynamic under center for them. LSU, man, talked about the great tradition, always competing for national championships, explosive offense with a track record of developing quarterbacks. we'll see who LSU can land here in this cycle. They're also at or near the top of the list for Faison Brandon. I probably like Tennessee there, but no question that LSU's on the short list there. They landed Bryce Underwood in 2025. So, but LSU's a place where you go and bet on yourself. You got a chance to win the Heisman Trophy and hear your name called early in the NFL draft, playing on a potentially great roster. Texas is an interesting school here, Josh. He had a really great visit when he was on campus in the spring, said the program's one of the best in the country. Sarkisian and Coach A.J. Milwee, those are guys he could see himself playing for because of the way they develop quarterbacks and what they do offensively. And he's got that return visit locked in for early June, and it doesn't hurt that he's good friends with Texas's current quarterback commit, KJ Lacey. Ohio State, he grew up liking them. Coach Day competing for national titles. CJ Stroud, some of the other guys he's developed certainly rings a bell with him. Who do I like? Man, if I liked someone, I'd have an RPM on him right now, Josh. But those are the schools that I think are in the best shape for all the reasons I gave you. And we'll see what happens on these return visits with Texas locked in for June 1 per our guy, Chad Simmons.
Yeah, and we could be 6 to 8 weeks out. I don't know, man. I might give the edge to Miami right now. He's from American Heritage. He's been there a million times. We'll see what happens. Like you said, there's some big visits set, but maybe I'm giving the edge to Miami right now. Let's move on and talk about another major development that happened over the weekend. David Sanders' official visit to Nebraska. You kind of had a feeling something like this might pop up. We talked about David Sanders on your show, Wilt Fong Whip Around, on Thursday, and you mentioned that you wouldn't be surprised if you saw him pop up somewhere, before the June official visits happen. Sure enough, we saw him in Lincoln, Nebraska this weekend. What does that mean for his recruitment?
Well, Josh, on the same show, we also said that we thought Nebraska's visit list could grow with one elite player. So we knew David Sanders was going to be visiting Nebraska. We let some of this news break on these prospects' times, and so David Sanders took his visit there. I got a text from Dylan Raiola's dad, Dominic Raiola, one of the best offensive linemen in Nebraska history, and he said, whether Nebraska has a chance or not, it's awesome to see the Sanders family giving Lincoln an opportunity. That was pre-visit. Look, we know that the Nebraska program is behind Matt Rule and this coaching staff in full force. And so we'll see what the visit this weekend did, how it moved the needle, because we know Tennessee and Ohio State are two that we really like in this recruitment right now. We think that this upcoming official visit to Georgia could be a big needle mover, as Georgia was an early front runner in this recruitment. Obviously, Clemson's a finalist. They get the official May 31st. And then you still got Alabama and South Carolina in there. But to spend Mother's Day weekend in Lincoln instead of hitting your favorite brunch spot in Charlotte, taking a weekend off and staying at home, I think it shows that, look, Nebraska has the chops to get elite players on campus, and they went out there and saw it, and we'll see what happens moving forward. Does David Sanders take his recruitment into the fall? Then maybe does he get back for a game? Then we'd be able to say, hey, this is a program that's to be taken serious, because all his other finalists he's been to numerous times. He's been to Nebraska once. Huskers are hoping for love at first sight. I'm still waiting to hear more about how the visit went, but Matt Rule and this staff, they're going to try and recruit the best players possible at Nebraska. They're going to take their swings on elite players, and they got David Sanders to campus this weekend, and we'll see what happens moving forward.
Yeah, and he wasn't even the biggest news coming out of Lincoln this weekend. 4-star quarterback TJ Latif from California, top 25 quarterback, commits to Nebraska. How were the Huskers able to land really one of the top uncommitted quarterbacks in the country?
Well, this is the guy they zeroed in on. He was QB1 on their board. You go where you're loved, right? And this is a guy that Matt Rule and this coaching staff absolutely coveted. They invested a lot of time in. They think he can be awesome in their system. When Nebraska lands Dylan Raiola and Daniel Kahlil in the cycle before, it takes a guy with a certain belief and conviction in himself to get in there and compete. In Nebraska, they're creating a standard in this quarterback room now of guys that can really get in there and compete with each other and push each other. And TJ Latif's a guy that they view could come in and push these two true freshmen that they have on the roster that they believe that are so talented. But again, it was the relationship and the amount of time and emphasis. No program No program coveted and loved TJ Latif as much as Nebraska did.
All right, well, big weekend for Nebraska. Who saw that coming? But look, the Huskers are turning it on. We talked a little bit last week that they are gaining momentum on the trail, and this just goes to show it. Steve, thanks for dropping by the Inside Scoop, kind of hitting on some of the big developments from the weekend. We're going to get into it more tomorrow on your show, the Wiltfong Whip Around, Monday mornings. Looking forward to that. Texas transfer quarterback Terrence Brooks is off the board moments ago, the top available quarter, committed to Illinois. Now, that happened just moments before we sat down to tape this video, and I have a feeling there could be even more on the way. I got On3 portal expert Pete Nakos here to talk some. Who else? Cormani McClain, and also the best of what's left in the transfer portal. But before we get going, guys, smash that subscribe button for me. Look at this, almost a 50K. You guys are getting us there. I appreciate it. Hit subscribe. All right, let's bring on portal expert Pete Nakos. Pete, first of all, happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, Josh.
Thank you. Let's get right to it. These guys are committing left and right. I don't want to miss one. One big name, though, that hasn't committed, that's Colorado transfer Cormani McClain. But a ton of talk this weekend because he showed up in Gainesville on Friday. And Pete, it sounds like things are pretty serious between him and the Florida Gators. Could this get wrapped up soon, or are other teams still in the mix?
You know, Josh, after almost a month of silence from Cormani McClain, we have movement. Yeah, Josh, Cormani, his mother, and his agent were in Gainesville on Friday, and sources tell On3 that there's a good chance that Cormani will be back on campus this week. Tuesday has been thrown around as a possible target, but nothing is set in stone. I really like where Florida's at right now. There's definitely mutual interest between both parties. And I think Florida presents a lot of options that Cormani likes, right? In the past, we've talked to USF, UCF, Memphis. Mm-hmm. Florida obviously gives them the opportunity to play in the SEC.
So we know he's familiar with Florida. He, throughout his recruitment, we all know what happened there. If he was there this weekend, is he waiting on something? Why didn't he come off the board? What's going on between him and Florida? Is there an offer? Is there a sticking point? Like, what's going on here?
There's been some reports that maybe if Cormani went on the roster right now, there wouldn't be a scholarship spot for him. He might have to walk on. As On3's Gator Online, though, has pointed out, the scholarship count could shift this summer, and maybe a scholarship would open up. So I think those are just some of the fine details that are kind of being combed through. I've heard of some other schools maybe in the mix, but I think right now the interest between Florida and the McClain camp, that's kind of where things stand right now.
We're hearing a lot between USF, UCF. Is that still on the board? And would they be willing to maybe offer him a scholarship, whereas UF, may or may not?
Can't comment on that. It really just seems like Florida has emerged as this kind of almost a top target. I don't want to say they're the school to watch just yet, but it's really clear that there's interest between both parties, and that's kind of where Cormani McClain's focus is at the moment.
All right. Well, let's move on to Edge Tyler Barron. We'll keep an eye on Cormani McClain, but Edge Tyler Barron. Now, I thought he was going to join Miami as they kind of had a lot of momentum coming off of his visit. I think it was 2 weeks ago now. What's the latest, though, on Tyler Barron, and is Miami still involved?
Yeah, Josh, you said it. I mean, Miami really thought they had a lot of momentum 2 weeks ago, and then Tyler Barron coming off that visit makes the decision to visit USC last weekend, and then this weekend, from my understanding, didn't make any visits. But man, Miami and USC both feel like they're in this. I don't think anyone can rule out Ole Miss until this is all said and done. And I mean, they've had some contact with Tyler Barron and his family, I know, and from my understanding, he hasn't made a visit yet to Ole Miss, but there's definitely been contact there. So those kind of appear to be the three schools to watch. The one thing I mentioned with Tyler Barron is he sat out most of the spring with injury. Right. Is that factoring into any decisions on schools' parts? I don't believe so, because people just view him as such an immediate impact on a player.
All right, Grand Valley State defensive lineman JVR Suggs. He's been on the market. He's been highly coveted in Michigan, Kentucky, Wisconsin. But in the past few days, LSU has entered the chat. Is LSU now considered the favorite here? How do you break it down?
For so long, it always seemed like Michigan was the favorite in this, Josh. And Florida State was actually really in the mix too, and made his initial, I think, top four schools, which he's now redone, put LSU in.
Right.
Florida State's out. He's at LSU right now, from my understanding. He's there till Tuesday on a visit. I mean, connecting the dots, obviously, right? Brian Kelly was at Grand Valley State, won 2 D2 national championships there. I believe one of Brian Kelly's sons knows JVR Suggs. So I think things are trending in the right direction for LSU. And if we're going to be honest here, LSU really needs a defensive tackle, and you kind of get the feeling that they're going all in on this recruitment.
All right. Last name we got to hit on is South Alabama linebacker Kahlil Jacobs. And this week he had to call off visits to Alabama and Missouri. Now, he did make it to Auburn, though. So do you have an update on his plans, or are the Tigers now in pole position?
Yeah, so he made it to Auburn. Ole Miss is now in the chat as well, in the mix, I should say. And then he had to call off visits to Alabama and Missouri. But he told me this past Friday that those two are still in the mix, and he's hoping to reschedule those visits, but no dates have been set in stone just yet.
Gotcha. Well, it looks like the portal's winding down, but there's still some coveted names on the board. You guys, let me know, comment section below. Where do we think Cormani McClain's going? What's going on with Kahlil Jacobs? You guys are the experts. Let us know what you think. Comment section below. Carter Lowe is a top 5 offensive tackle in the country, committed to Ohio State, but the Buckeyes are looking to sign a few more elite offensive linemen in this class. And they hosted a few good ones over the weekend that they'd like to sign and add to this 2025 recruiting class, including one offensive tackle that was offered last month and now has Ohio State in his top 3. I got Matt Parker from Letterman Row on this video. We're going to break down the Buckeye O-line board. But first, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. All right. Let's bring on Matt Parker from Letterman Row. And first of all, happy Mother's Day. Now, Ohio State has the #1 class in America. Today, we're going to focus on the O-line, though. Like I said, 1 commit so far, but the board is deep and talented. Let's talk about a few names that were on campus this weekend, starting with 4-star offensive tackle Jackson Lloyd, who, ironically, was offered this week and is already visited Columbus just a few days later. That's got to bode well for the #6 offensive tackle in America, who is trending to Alabama. But tell us, Jackson Lloyd on campus this weekend, what do you make of it?
Yeah, Josh, to me, that's a fast developing recruitment right there with, you just mentioned it, Justin Fry, Ohio State offensive line coach, offered Jackson Lloyd, the number 29 overall prospect, according to Charles Power and Cody Belair here at On3. This is a guy that, Justin Fry visited on Tuesday. He gets to Ohio State this weekend. So that to me is very telling of how serious both Ohio State is about Jackson Lloyd, and in turn, how serious Lloyd is about Ohio State. As you mentioned, considered a pretty heavy Alabama lean. I know On3 Steve Wiltfong has put in an RPM for Lloyd to the Crimson Tide, but just based off of the early things that I've heard about this visit, Ohio State has moved the needle. I mean, to make a trip from California to Ohio after only getting an offer, maybe 4 or 5 days before the visit. Again, I keep saying that it's telling and how fast that this is moving. And that's because Ohio State doesn't really have the luxury of time to necessarily build as deep of relationships as it typically likes to do with high school prospects. I think Ohio State is coming at a point of they are very well aware of the fact that they only have Carter Lowe. Some places have him as a 5-star offensive tackle, but he's the only guy in the class right now for Justin Fry. And there is definitely a foot on the gas for these prospects that we're going to talk about here moving forward. But to me, Jackson Lloyd was perhaps the most important visitor of the offensive line trio because he's so versatile. He's a 3-sport athlete: football, basketball, baseball. And very impressive in both of the other sports other than football as well, I'd like to add. He moves well, he bends well, he's athletic. It's exactly what an offensive lineman in a Ryan Day, Chip Kelly kind of offense needs to be. So check out Letterman Row later on this week for a real nitty-gritty update on that visit. But early tellings it was very good for Ohio State.
Yeah, and kind of like you said, everything developed so quickly. Steve put in that pick for Alabama, I want to say 6, 7, 8 days ago. So it was right before Jackson Lloyd was offered by Ohio State. It was well before he visited Ohio State. So like you said, it'll be interesting to see what he has to say coming out of this weekend. Now, 4-star offensive lineman Henry Fuku, kind of a similar story. He's from Fort Worth, Texas. He was offered at the end of April, so, about 3 weeks ago. Really intriguing prospect because he's an interior offensive lineman, a big man that moves people with a soccer background. So what are you hearing about Henry Fuku after his visit to Ohio State this weekend?
Well, looking at anytime we look at a prospect, I think, at least for me, the knee-jerk reaction is to look at the On3 recruiting prediction machine and seeing okay, is it pretty even with, a couple schools, or is there just a runaway favorite?
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like Ole Miss right now is just that runaway favorite. A lot of visits to Oxford and stuff like that, but making the trip to Ohio State really opened his eyes for the possibility of, what being an Ohio State football player could be, spending time with Justin Fry. Not a whole lot of players on campus right now because Ohio State, they wrapped up their spring semester. Guys are at home and stuff like that. But that kind of is advantageous when it's this relationship so early on in the relationship, and just needing to be around Justin Fry more, needing to be around Ryan Day more, and Chip Kelly, and guys like Mark Pantoni, Ohio State's general manager, and a bunch of support staff people. So I still think Ohio State is going to have a lot of legwork that it needs to do to be a more serious contender for Fuku. But again, just getting to campus after, only having an offer for, 4 to 5 weeks is big. It's massive. And there aren't many programs in the country that would be able to do something like that. Fortunately, for me who covers Ohio State is able to do that. So it makes things a little bit easier.
Yeah, you can tell right now that Ohio State's kind of pushing the gas on offensive line recruiting because 3-star offensive tackle Andrew Starle visited Ohio State. He's another one that was offered in April about 2 or 3 weeks ago. He's from the state of Georgia. And after his visit, he had Ohio State now solidly in his top 3. Do you think Andrew Starle should be on commit watch if you're an Ohio State fan?
I would say yes, but not right this moment. He told Letterman Rose, Alex Gleitman, that he is still intending on committing on July 4th, like many other prospects like to do. The official visits are done, but Starle went into this visit without an Ohio State official visit locked up, and he was only on campus for one day, Josh. He was just there Friday and then headed back home to Georgia. But he has an official visit locked in. He'll be there June 7th through the 9th. And that top 3 of Ohio State, Kentucky, and Central Florida, one of those programs is not like the other in that top 3, if you ask me. So again, it comes down to, will Starle and his family, really, I guess, kind of buy into the recruiting pitch that Ohio State is laying out there of, it's a 3 to 4 year plan, maybe a 5-year plan, if because offensive line, it takes a little more time to develop.
Yeah.
But you mentioned tackle. I really like him more as an interior kind of prospect. He has, again, an athletic background, and you look at his tape, he's just so physical on the interior. If you just moved him inside a little bit, I could definitely see more of a swing tackle opportunity for him at Ohio State. And that kind of works, I think, for both him, because it would get him onto the field a little bit quicker should he choose Ohio State. But also it works out for Ohio State because it can recruit that swing tackle position while still going after guys like, Jackson Lloyd or Henry Fuku, or continuing going after David Sanders, who Ohio State hosted last weekend and has David Sanders and his family coming back at the end of June. So there's a lot of possibilities with all of these prospects that are new on the Ohio State board, I should say, because they're also versatile. And I think that's one of the biggest things is that we've really discovered that in these last 6 weeks.
Right. Those were the 3 prospects that were on campus. I think Fuku and Starle, Ohio State's maybe in a little bit better position with, but I think the door is now open with Jackson Lloyd. So we'll see how they do there. Now, you mentioned David Sanders. He was on campus last weekend. We talk about him all the time on this channel. I think we did 2 or 3 videos on him in the last 5 days. You guys can go check those out. But who are some other names at the top of the Ohio State offensive line board that Buckeye fans need to know?
Well, Ohio State is still hanging around with Micah DeBose, who there's been a lot of LSU smoke, but now there are other programs entering the mix. I saw your show with Steve Wiltfong. Yeah, that was a great way that you had said that earlier last week, that recruitment is a little more open. And Ohio State, I'm pretty sure Steve Wiltfong had mentioned this, but Ohio State has like always just been lurking in the weeds for that
Mhm.
recruitment. You'll remember in January during that winter contact period, there were a few Ohio State coaches that made it down to Alabama to see Micah DeBose. I believe it was Justin Fry. Keenan Bailey was there. At the time, Corey Dennis, the former quarterbacks coach, was there. Just a whole bunch of guys. So Ohio State, I would say, is, they're certainly not in pole position, but they need to be at least paid attention to, I will say, because of the time and effort. Then you have another guy like Douglas Utu out of Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas, Nevada. Ohio
Mhm.
State does have relationships at that school. It's worth noting that former defensive lineman Haskell Garrett is the defensive line coach at Bishop Gorham. So that kind of right there is a little bit of, hey, I went to Ohio State. Look at what Ohio State did for me. Can do the same thing for you. An in-state guy that I think people, especially within the state of Ohio, should really start paying attention to is Nolan Davenport, the three-star offensive tackle out of Massillon, Washington. Last fall, his junior year was the first year that he played offensive tackle. He used to be a tight end, but he's about 6'6" and now 300 pounds. So quite the development physically there. He's a guy that's going to camp at Ohio State this summer in June, and I wouldn't be too shocked if he earns an offer as well. So Ohio State very thoroughly inspecting the state one last time just to make sure that it didn't miss anybody. And I wanted to go back. I know we had moved on, but I wanted to go back on this for Ohio State fans real quick. The recruitment of Andrew Stargle reminds me so much of the recruitment of Gabe Van Sickle from the 2024 cycle, the interior offensive lineman out of Coopersville, Michigan, who was committed to Northwestern for a long time. Ohio State discovered him in late September,
Mhm.
and by Thanksgiving, Ohio State flipped him from the Wildcats, and he ended up being a top 150 prospect by On3. He's going to get to Ohio State in a few weeks once he's finished with high school, and there's a lot of optimism about the kind of player that Van Sickle can be. Just looking at his recruitment and now Andrew Stargle, there's some similarities there. So I definitely think Ohio State really, really needs to be paid attention to there with Andrew Stargle.
Yeah, things are starting to heat up. So, Ohio State fans, let me know. Comment section below. Which offensive lineman is your top target? Who do you think the Buckeyes end up with? Let me know. Comment section below. Well, you've made it to the end of today's video, but there's hundreds more videos on the On3 Recruits channel for you to check out. And also, while you're here, hit subscribe.